All
All
right,
right.
I'll let Sanjay kick us off.
First of all, good morning, good evening, folks who have joined us for this webinar today. I wanted to talk about a challenge that every technology team, every IT team, every enterprise team, every CIO wrestles with. And this is what I call is the testing conundrum. Most boardroom conversations go like this, that everything looks fine during development, everything is green, the team is very confident about what they're doing. And then towards the end of when 90% of the work is done, when the testing starts, the bugs start happening. And suddenly, not one bug or two bugs, but multiple bugs start coming. And then, people start talking, and project managers are in the dock as to why did not we catch this earlier. And the truth is that isn't a testing problem alone. It's a systematic problem of timing, visibility, and approach. Most organizations still operate in what I call as a reactive quality mode. We wait for defects to emerge, we wait for QA cycles to start, and then we wait to validate them again and again. And this creates a lot of challenges in terms of faster release cycles, team burnout, and so on and so many things. And the cost of fixing these bugs over a period of time is almost like 10x of the original effort that one has spent on actually coding. And this is the heart of the testing conundrum. We spend enormous amounts of time detecting defects rather than preventing them. And automation and using AI is one of the tools that can help us focus and improve on that tremendously. So in terms of, if you're looking at really what are these costs, so there is a reactive cost, which is the firefighting cost, the rework cost, the retesting cost, the delays, the rollbacks, the war room, as we call it, and 24 and 48 hours war rooms are created to fix these issues. And these costs hit the project, the budget, and sometimes even the customer experience deteriorates as a result. Then there are the preventive costs. These are the investments we make upfront: better requirements clarity, shift left testing, automated test coverage, improved data, AI driven analysis. And these are deliberate, structured, and predictable efforts that an organization can build into their organization to be able to reduce the cost of quality. Unfortunately, most organizations overinvest in the reactive cycle and do not and underinvest in the preventive cycle. And I think that's the paradigm that we need to change. We need to be moving focus on the preventive cycle rather than the reactive cycle. Because prevention doesn't scream, prevention doesn't escalate, prevention does not show up as a red ticket effect. There are many people who would say, well, let's build this up and we'll figure it out, once we get to that problem. And whereas there are other managers or other, delivery directors who make sure that quality is inbuilt into the processes, into the system right from day one. And that is what I say is good quality engineering. When teams rely heavily on manual testing, limited coverage, late cycle deliveries, bugs will always feel unexpected. And deadlines will always feel slippery. And we end up reacting to these problems instead of being designing systems to avoid them. And the real transformation begins when an organization shifts its mindset from test to detect to test to prevent. And that's where tools like Tricentis come in with a very high amount of AI engineering built into them to help us prevent defects rather than testing the defects out. That means bringing quality activities earlier into the life cycle, automating repetitive tasks so that human focus is on intelligence, on creativity rather than on detection, using AI for risk based prioritization and early pattern detection, ensuring traceability from requirements to deployment, and making quality a shared responsibility and not the burden of a single QA team. When we operate this way, bugs stop becoming surprises, deadlines stop slipping, quality becomes more proactive and not reactive. And this testing conundrum is not a mystery, it's a choice between paying small, predictable, preventive costs today, improving processes, or paying large, unpredictable, reactive costs tomorrow. And the choice is ours. As leaders and practitioners, we are responsible to choose the path that builds resilience, not chaos, foresight, not hindsight, prevention, and reaction. Because at the end, great software is not about just results of great testing alone. It is a result of building quality into each step of the journey. Over to you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Sanjay. I think you captured it well and and set up the conversation. And so just to recap kind of what you framed out. So a lot of reactivity, a lot of budget spent on fixing instead of preventing. And quality ultimately, can become a bottleneck, right? That exacerbates the cost of quality if we don't take the initiative to do some of these things, leverage AI to help us accomplish them. And so I want to build on that a little bit because uh, AI and AI generated code in particular is creating new challenges for us. And it's different than what we faced before. And it's not just more code, even though that's important. It's about a different type of code that requires a different kind of testing, and that also affects the cost of quality. So if we just take a quick look at these numbers here, I'm not going to read them to you, but it's an obvious trend that I think we've all experienced. Agentic coding is growing in usage, and it's driving a fundamentally different development velocity and a demand on testing teams. So I think that we know. Um, but this is something I just wanted to acknowledge is that this is what the QA teams are doing with it today. But there's an additional challenge to be aware of here. And so, well, we can't really do show of hands, but I'm sure some of you guys have teenagers. So if you don't, just imagine, a person who likes the fastest path to get something done without thinking about the consequences. So I actually have a 13-year-old, and they can be, impatient, easily frustrated, and sometimes do strange things, nonsensical things, because they just want to get the thing done. They just want to, in this case, pass the test. And so they'll take shortcuts, like, when you say take out the trash, they'll take it outside, but not all the way to the trash can. And then they'll make things up like, oh, I thought you said just take it outside, not to the actual trash can. And so that's what we call hallucinations. So before we go, I'll share an example on this. But before we go into the example, the key here is I just want to make sure we're being realistic about what we're dealing with, right? Why quality engineering becomes more important, not less important in this AI sort of accelerated world. It's more than just more code. And so if we take a look at a real example, right, that I know a lot of you are testers, so this will be a very familiar example. So taking a retirement account application, right? We've all seen this before. So when a human tests this, we know what to do, right? This is just a simple boundary condition test. What happens when the age is 17 versus 18 versus 64, 65? And then we usually just check the normal cases in the middle. But here's what AI can do, right? If it is trying to make a failing test pass, right? And that's the instruction that the developer is trying to address. It can create code that says if age equals 43, then do this thing, right? And that will cause the test to pass. But there's not like a real business reason behind it, right? There's no logic. It just made it up because it passed the test. And so the scary thing is to think about, right? Especially for us that are in the QA practice, is your unit test will pass, your integration test will pass, maybe, and this gets all the way to production, right? But then one day, right, someone who's exactly 43-year-old has a potentially really confusing or bad experience with the application. So it begs the question, right? Why does AI behave in this way? And so it's not a bug, and I know a lot of us understand this, but the way I think about it is, if you're watching a movie and you can only see kind of like 30 seconds at a time, and you have to guess what happens next based upon that tiny part of the movie that you watched, that's kind of what AI is doing in a code base. It can only see a small slice at any given moment. And so, we all know like context windows are increasing, coding advantages are getting better, but this problem exists right now. And so when it encounters a failing test, it's not thinking like, what is the business requirement? What is the security implication? How does this fit into the broader architecture? It's thinking, how do I make this red light turn green, right? And the fastest path to green, even though it doesn't make sense to us as humans, that's what wins. And so this is very much different from how human developers work, right? As a developer, you're thinking about the entire IT ecosystem. And so there are business objectives, there's security, there's regulatory requirements. And, if you're a senior engineer, architecture, or architect, this, right? It's not just about passing, the test for today, right? It's about building for something that's sustainable. And so I wanted to point this out because this is exactly why comprehensive end-to-end testing becomes a critical line of defense, right? As the business transactions keep getting more complex, and as AI optimizes more locally, you need testing that validates globally. And so this is where automation becomes really important as we look to control the cost of quality. So, who are the adults in the room? Well, the testers have to be the adults in the room, right? Um, and so this is where, as we think about quality engineering teams becoming or being the parent or guardian, right, in this AI world that we kind of now live in, you know, you know, maybe I'll just throw this out there. Like if you have a teenager, uh, and you have a car and they're just learning how to drive, you don't just say like go nuts, right? Go have fun with my car. You don't just hope for the best. You teach them how to drive, right? You supervise. Maybe you're sitting in the passenger seat with them, and you're there to step in, right? When things go wrong. And so I think that's actually a good analog for the role that I think QE teams have to play when we think about AI generated code. Um, uh, and so I think that if we think about what is the early warning system here, where AI generated code might pass unit tests, might make it all the way into production if we don't solve for it, is we need to think about end-to-end testing. We need to think about how we do code reviews and what we look for in those code reviews. It's not just looking for the illogical, it's looking for the unnecessary, the risky, right? And this is also where change impact analysis becomes important, because if your test suites grow so large to where you sort of lost the thread around like what are the important tests to run that matter, then you're gonna really struggle to keep up. And the cost of actually maintaining that suite over time is just going to continue to increase. So one thing that I wanted to also make clear, before I talk more about kind of what do we do about all of this, is that AI is not replacing testers. So testers are becoming more strategically important, not less, because ultimately you're the guardians of this new world, right? The role got bigger and more strategic, not smaller. So I think you've got to the role shifts, and there is a shift that happens within QE teams that we should talk about, and that's part of how we need to think about the solution. So what is the shift, right? What is the transformation that QE teams need to make? Given all the transformation that's happening upstream in the development organizations that we partner with, if QA teams are supposed to ultimately shift left, how does that happen, right? How do QA teams keep up when code is coming in 10 times faster? So in sort of this old world, your job was to execute the test, find the bugs, and maybe you're running automated suites, but you had to keep those things up to date. So as you have to execute more tests, and there's more velocity to keep up with, and you just add more people, right? Maybe twice as much people to keep up. But that assumes kind of a linear scaling model, and that's not going to work, right? If we're trying to manage the cost of quality. And this is exacerbated by the fact that a lot of that budget was reactive, so fixing problems after they've already become an issue. And so the shift that needs to happen is we need to flip this model completely, right? So the job becomes orchestrating AI testing agents. So where you as the testing experts are defining what good looks like, right? You're setting up the workflows, the standards, how you want test design to happen, and then you're reviewing the results, not manual executing thousands of tests. And so maybe a good way to think about this is, since I use the word orchestrator, is like moving from being a solo musician to being a conductor, right? A conductor doesn't play like every single instrument. They coordinate the orchestra to do something, bigger and more beautiful than any, one musician could do on their own. And so your team doesn't grow 10 times as big, your capability grows 10 times, right? And that's kind of what we're after. So your budget shifts from reactive firefighting to proactive prevention, right? As Sanjay mentioned, from fixing problems to preventing them. So the last thing I'll make on here before I want to ask Sanjay a question is that this is not about starting over though, right? For many of you, you've built up years and years of test assets. Maybe you've got initiatives that you have sort of ongoing. So this is a transformation that needs to happen with everything that you've already built. And this is something that Tricentis is investing in explicitly. So how do we leverage your existing test assets, your expertise, your processes, right? Where AI is augmenting like what you have, not replacing it, because that's how you match the velocity that's happening in the development realm by leveraging AI to do the same thing within the QA realm. So I will now just to ask Sanjay a question that was sort of going through my head as I was thinking about this is, when you're sitting down, right, and a lot of QA organizations are going through this transformation. So when you're sitting down with, the leader of, let's say, the VP of quality or the leader of a center of excellence, and you're talking about, a project. What are their biggest hesitations? Like, what makes them nervous about the shift that we believe needs to happen?
Sure. So, thanks, Chris. I'd like to just add, the journey of an AI-driven test management is just not about adoption or tool. And many companies feel that, just bringing the tool in will solve the problems. It does not. Well, it is about the mindset, the culture, the trust, and the empowerment. AI is not supposed to replace people, as we just discussed. It is to enhance the performance of people. So, like I say, that the best will become better, and the average will also become better. So it's a combination of using the AI models in the correct space and making our tester be more productive. So what I would like to see in terms of, in the testing community is people saying AI has helped me to catch a defect earlier, or, it has helped me to complete my regression in half the time, or I can focus on complex scenarios, edge cases, where earlier I was not focusing on all these things. What happens is the other thing is that many times the resistance comes from the process, that people feel that the process becomes an overhead to them and it will stop them from being nimble or agile, which is, I don't think so. It happens that way. Whenever you cut corners, you're trying to, you will end up, spending additional effort somewhere else. So the process is up to you, how complex you want to make it, how simple you want to make it. And all these tools are fantastic. They bring the best practices, they're optimized, they help you to reduce your effort, they help you to do things faster. And all of these things are important for a VP of a development or of a director of development to understand that implementation of a AI-based tool is not an additional cost, but if implemented properly, it will help you to reduce your cost of quality eventually. And what you were doing in, say, maybe $1 million earlier, now with the tool adoption, you may be able to do it at in $800,000. And that kind of a mindset is there with people once they adopt these tools properly, but it becomes a resistance for a person who is not aware of what is out there in the marketplace today.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sanjay. And so I think that the question then is now, what can we do about it? How do we think about the solutions to this? And so I want to talk a little bit about that. And before I show you kind of what Tricentis' solution is, I wanted to just that a lot of you are not using Tricentis, and so I just wanted to give you some perspective around where is Tricentis at in terms of customer adoption and AI. And so we've been at AI actually before AI was cool, back when it was machine learning and before Gen AI. And so I'm not going to read these stats to you, but we have customers running in production with our AI. So this is not just a demo where there are real use cases being solved. So just to give you some perspective around our evolution, so this didn't happen overnight. This has been over 2 decades. And so this has been a sustained commitment, sort of a journey that we've been on. Initially introducing with Tosca, for those of you familiar with that, with model-based testing, in order to help with asset reuse as you build new test suites and new tests. And then Vision AI for self-healing, to test management, and then to the co-pilots, which were more assistive, and now to agentic. And then where we are all the way to the right, and this is sort of our current focus, is how do you integrate it with a customer or your software development lifecycle? So, we've talked about, shift left for quite a while. And so how do you integrate, quality practices into a DevOps lifecycle? And so now the question is like, how do you do that with AI, right? Because there's an AI dev tool change that should ultimately connect to agentic quality engineering. And so that's what we're building at Tricentis. And so I'll walk you through kind of what this looks like. So just to give you just a sort of a bird's eye view of what we're building and kind of what we've got. So we have an AI platform that we've built. So this is the enterprise grade trust layer foundation. So security, scale, audit trails, and then also a consumption-based model for charging for AI is something that we're building everything on. Then we have, with some of you might be familiar with Model Context Protocol, or MCPs, which allows all of the current products and engines that we built over the years to be exposed to AI. And so this allows, for example, developers, if they're already using Cursor or Copilot, they can integrate through MCP our Tricentis tools to those platforms, so they don't need to switch context. So the idea is that quality can get captured in the flow of their world, the flow of their work. And then we've got agent AIs, or agentic AI. And so something I want to be clear about is, this is not just ChatGPT connected to our products. So I don't know if some of you remember this, but I'm sure you maybe some of you are trying this still now. Is when it first came out, we all sort of tried like, hey, here's a requirement, generate me some test cases. And this has gotten a lot better, but it still hallucinates and it imagines like different things, different test steps that weren't in the requirement, or forgot about acceptance criteria that was in the requirement. And so the results weren't great initially. They're getting better, but that is not the way to solve for a specific task where you're expecting a certain sort of quality of output. But we need a specific artificial intelligence. And so that's what agents are. So this is the idea of baking expertise in. So coverage scenarios, negative scenarios, edge cases, a taxonomy for what things should look like. Because it's not just about generating stuff. You don't want just like a bunch of test cases. You need good test cases. And then at the bottom left, it's the AI workspace. So that ties it all together. So you're building workflows, you're managing agents, you're governing the whole process. So I'm going to try to move through these next slides pretty quickly, but I just want to give you an idea of kind of what this actually looks like in practice, in terms of how it connects with the tools that you may have heard about from Tricentis. So at the sort of the core is our current products that you use, some of you, to do your work. Maybe you use competitive tools, and that's fine. So maybe instead of Qtest, you've got some other test management solution. But the idea is like, these are core functions that you need to do as a quality engineering team, whether it's test management or it's automation or it's performance and non-functional testing. And ultimately, what you would want to do is connect these with the various teams that are ultimately either needing access to the information, needing access to the results, or they're an input into the practice. And so the way that we do that is, and we ultimately allow sort of bring your own AI, is through MCPs. So we're trying to keep an open ecosystem so that you can connect your AI to our tools to do your work. So that's kind of that in a nutshell. And so to kind of keep this moving forward, then we've got the AI workspace, which I'll talk about a little bit as we talk about our vision for the future. But we've got the AI workspace. And so this is where everything sort of comes together. So think about this as an integrated platform, because if you think about the cost of quality and your path to addressing quality engineering, sort of at the high level, it's around bringing these things together, right? It's not just about functional, it's about non-functional testing as well. And it's not just about driving to test automation, it's closing the loop, right? Because you have to understand the results, and you have to understand how those results are going to feed back into improving your coverage. So this needs to be a closed loop process that integrates with your SDLC and not rebuilding it, but really mapping to how you work. And so that's what we're trying to build, just to cast a little vision. So to connect that with obviously the topic of why you guys came here is how does all this connect to cost of quality? And so what we've introduced is AI capabilities in each one of these different functional areas that ultimately improve productivity and efficiency, which then ultimately translate into cost of quality impact. And so there's a lot of opportunities here. So you could use the tools individually, or you could put them together. But ultimately, our goal is to enable you as our customers to fundamentally change the dynamic of how your organization works, right? We were trying to do that before AI, but AI allows us to sort of level that up. And so, Sanjay, I know that you work with hundreds of probably thousands of customers over the years, to actually implement Tricentis and measure results. And so I'm curious from your perspective, when you're talking about, ROI, with one of the leaders in these organizations, what are the impacts that resonate most with them? What are they actually tracking 6 months in?
Sure. So I think, firstly, I think it's not the financial part of the cost of implementing such tools. I think we are in a world where we are releasing updates, new functionalities almost on a daily basis, if not weekly. And if you go back to 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we used to make, say, maybe 1 or 2 releases a year. Now, when you are trying to have almost daily releases, you can only achieve that if you have automation in place. If you do not have automation in place, and that's what is the biggest business driver, that to be able to release and then not, and then making sure that the release is successful, there has to be automation. It cannot be done without it. The second thing is people want to understand that quality is not about just finding bugs. Quality's role is much superior to that. They have to bring that value add as to how much more value can we create in the system, and they are supposed to be being able to provide that value add on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. So unless you have proper systems, tools, and processes in place, you are just trying to firefight. And I think that's where the boardroom people now have started understanding that if we have to differentiate from the competition, it's not just giving a MVP, which is a minimal viable product, out to the marketplace. You have to make sure that your product is superior, your updates are happening on a regular basis, so that your brand is promoted as well as it is protected at all times.
Yeah, that's great. So I know you're going to walk us through some specific examples of ROI with some actual customer examples. So I'll go ahead and move on to the next slide so you can start to walk through some of those. I think that'll be really compelling to connect these things together.
Sure. So one of the first success stories that we would like to share, where we have partnered with Tricentis to bring value to the customer. So this is a global enterprise running Oracle EBS, and they were using multiple tools, but there was, as you know, multiple tools many times don't talk to each other. So there was some kind of a, I would say, break in the process, and defects were found late. Testing was isolated. So what we did was implemented an integrated AI augmented ecosystem using Jira plus Qtest plus Flex Deploy plus Tosca, enabling intelligent test selection. And as a result, what we were able to have a higher coverage in a less time, faster releases, and fewer production issues as well. So what we talk about is CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment. So using a combination of all these tools, we were able to have a seamless pipeline to make sure that we were able to deliver, or the customer was able to make faster releases on a regular basis. So this is one of the examples. This is again another example of a manufacturing company. The client was struggling with fragile scripts, UI volatility, and slow test creation in Dynamics 65. And what we ended up doing is to build up an automation framework using Tosca plus Tricentis test case design with its AI-driven stability features. And as a result, a stable automation ecosystem delivering predictable runs, low maintenance were created, and a greater spread to market as well. And tools like Tricentis have these self-healing automation capabilities as well, which is very, very useful in real world scenarios. And as a result of this, just 1 second, yeah, the TCD acceleration test creation, we were able to reduce the effort by almost like 40%. This is of an oil and gas major. So where they are rolling out Greenfield SAP S4 rollout, and business wanted to have predictable visibility into the quality risk. So as an organization, we delivered a Tosca-based automation strategy, tightly integrated with Qtest, enabling real-time view of the process coverage, the risks, and the execution. And as a result of it, bugs were found faster, no late night, frights, clearer risk management, and a very strong alignment between the business. So we have used multiple tools from Tricentis to be able to deliver value to the customer. And I think if on an average, I would say that implementing Tricentis vis-a-vis not having a tool like Tricentis, there is almost like a 20 to 30% of overhead costs that you would have in an organization, whether it is in terms of inefficient processes, rework, and just making just firefighting all the way.
Great. Thanks, Sanjay. Yeah, I think it's great to, I know, you can't share the actual customer names, but, to be able to connect kind of what we've been talking about to, real world examples of how these things have come together for like real impact, especially with the teams that were involved here. So, so I think that, as I mentioned earlier, there's an opportunity here, right, for this kind of transformation. And, we're at Tricentis, along with our partners like ImpactQA, are really wanting to invest in this transformation and provide the right tools and services to make this happen. And so, as I mentioned earlier, this actually requires this shift, right, from execution to orchestration. And so this is from my boss, probably. The future is not an agent; it is an agentic workforce with human leadership, right? So this, I think, sums it up pretty well. This is our vision: is we're not trying to replace quality engineering teams with AI. There's not like this one magical AI agent that is going to solve all of our problems and reduce cost by workforce reduction. The idea is to introduce an agentic workforce that works alongside the testers and the quality engineers and the quality analysts, with them being the leaders of that virtual team. So I want to talk a little about like how, like more tactically, with some visuals around how we think about making that happen. Um, so this is kind of how we think about the future of test management, right? So the first thing that we need to deliver is the agents. So we're working on, as I mentioned earlier, AI agents for those core functions, initially focused on test creation, whether that be manual test cases or whether it be automated test cases or whether it be performance, user path scenarios. Um, and but it might not just be our agents, right? You may have agents from other vendors. You have third-party agents. Maybe you have custom agents that you're building. Maybe you've got some open source agents. So the idea is that in the future of test management, there's a workspace that manages them all, right? Because ultimately, all these things need to connect together. And then the core component that sort of makes that a reality is workflows that connect with compliance. So that map things to the way that you work, right? So all of you have your existing quality engineering practices. And so in order to make AI effective, it needs to augment your existing practices, right? You're not going to throw away, 10 years of process investment because, now that there's AI, because those are good processes, right? Those have been working. And it's how you make sure that AI doesn't act like a teenager, right? But that it acts with your supervision kind of on your behalf, right? Where it's executing what you're telling to do in the way that you want it to do it, right? So that's the key. So let's just talk about like what are the components in terms of how we think about solving this problem. So first, we need the triggers, right? And we need those triggers connected to AI. So this is, um, you know, I think very much distinct and different from maybe the way that a lot of us have experienced this on the consumer side, or maybe just in the day to day, right? Where you go to ChatGPT or Cursor or whatever it is, and you ask a question and it responds, right? You're basically prompting your way through. The idea here is that as we thought about, CI/CD and shift left, right? The idea is like connect AI with triggers, right? So you can make it proactive so that if you imagine a pull request is created by a developer, then it's automatically analyzed for test impact. And then when a deployment starts, let's automatically validate the performance criteria, and then ideally when the sprint begins, we could automate the generation of test cases, right, from new requirements. So the idea is like the AI stops waiting for you to be like, let's prompt our way through some process through chat assistance. The idea is that it acts on the events that you define in your SDLC, right? And this makes a lot of sense for us that have been trying to do this automation and shift left for a while. The important part here, though, and this is why I think um, we can't miss the fact that there's going to need to be human in the loop, and I believe this will be maybe not forever, but for a long time, is the need to connect these workflows with humans in the loop. So, um, whether you have Jira, GitHub, or whatever it is that you're using on the engineering side for development, you're going to need to connect those with agents, maybe micro agents that you've built to create these end-to-end quality workflows. And so the idea is by connecting these things together, we can integrate the agents with your supervision. So you can imagine, as you can see on the flow on the left, that there's human in the loop checks that would be inserted as part of this overall process where there's approval points. So if there's a high risk change, you can insert those in, and you as the testers, you as the performance engineer can actually approve maybe a test that it has generated and make sure that it actually maps to your process. But maybe you gain confidence over time and it's a low risk routine update, then maybe AI can handle some of those things in the background. So that's what we're trying to build is a system where you stay in control, right? You define what the guardrails are, and then AI operates in the boundaries that you set. So that's a little bit of context around how we envision the sort of the core center or middleware. And then the last part is the notifications. And so we know from human experience, right, that if I'm getting notifications in places that I never check. I probably have like, I don't know, 5 different chat applications on my phone, GroupMe, WhatsApp, iMessage, whatever. And it's near impossible to keep up. And so you can imagine, like in our world, we've got email, we've got Slack. We're not going to go somewhere else to go check, right? It's the idea is, notification user experience needs to be integrated in the place where you're already doing the work and where your teams are already working. And again, this is something that we've been building, right, for a while. We shift left with QA. So our plan is to connect AI with this so that, you're notified for, let's say, the decisions that matter, right, that you need to be engaged in, and then you're informed around the actions that are being taken by AI, so that you're getting to spend more time on the strategic things and not just working on a bunch of things that junior or an intern out of college could do. AI can be good at those things, but they need senior engineers, senior testers to go verify the outcomes. And so that's a little bit of a sneak peek in terms of things that we're building. We're planning before the end of the year to have um, an early preview of this. And so if you're interested in being part of what we're calling our rapid innovation program team, where we give early access to certain customers and partners, definitely reach out or post in the Q&A, and we'll connect with you and see, how, whether we can connect the dots on giving you some early previews of what we're building so that we can get your feedback and iterate alongside you. Um, so I'm going to switch gears here now, as we think about, where we go next. And so, one of the things that we've talked about, but I just want to again address it specifically, is some of these differentness, and the one that I know, Sanjay, you had called out as well, is this notion that AI is just going to replace testers or entire teams. And I know this is broadly like a macro conversation within the industry more broadly. um, but I think quality engineering is a practice with specific skill set, and there's a lot of process expertise that will need to get translated and mapped into a world where AI is maybe driving some of the core tasks. And so AI will need our guidance, right? We're going to need to provide uh, some guidance so that it gives consistent and correct results, not results that a teenager might give you, right? So I want to address that just again, just to make that clear. Um, so Sanjay, from your perspective, I'm just curious, like, out of these common myths that we've heard, which ones come up the most for you? And is there any ones that you want to provide a little bit more color on based upon your experiences?
Sure. See, from a people standpoint, obviously there is concern that AI will, you know, um, may make sure that there are job losses which will happen, which I don't think is going to be true. Like I said, the good people will become best, the average will become better. So overall, there will be a value add that will happen when employees start using AI-based tools. Uh, you will definitely be better than anybody else who's not using an AI-based tool. So, from that perspective, it is important for all of us to embrace AI. That's number one. The other issue is that people feel that AI is still not very mature, that it will hallucinate, it will not give me the best results. Obviously, there is areas of improvement, but even if you start with 80 to 90% of efficiency from using like tools like Tricentis, who have built up their AI capability over a period of time, I think it is a good investment to make in. And the other thing also, which obviously Chris has mentioned, is that people feel that AI is only for large enterprises. It's not for large enterprises. If you are a digital first company, and your speed to market is a very important, important KRA for you, you need to have AI based tools. Otherwise, there is no way you can manually execute, efficient test cases, test case planning as well as execution. So I think more and more people are getting excited about using AI-based tools, and thanks to the likes of ChatGPT, whether they're using it personally or professionally.
Mm.
And I think everybody, as a result, I think there is a democracy of a democratic use of AI already being used in every person's cell phone. So people are using it more and more. They're getting comfortable in using, large LLM models. There is also talk about replacing the biggest search engine. So I think what is happening is that I would say more and more people are embracing technology. They're embracing AI-based tools, and they're seeing the value. Again, like I said, there are no tools available in the market which are 100% accurate. But if you're a head start, and you're starting with about 80% of accuracy, I think that's a fantastic tool that you should implement.
Great. And so, where do you go from here? So, let's say you're already in progress, you're in process, or you're wanting to figure out how to scale. Um, and so one of the things that we've heard from our rapid innovation program team, or what we call RIPT, so these are customers, as I mentioned, are getting early access to our AI capabilities, is, we've learned that like understanding what their processes are today is critical, right? You have to know what good looks like. Those are the ones that are having the most success with AI, where they can say, this is how we do this. Maybe, they've got a center of excellence and they know how they want it done. Because then as we're working with them on AI enabled capabilities, they understand, how to measure output quality, right? And the true impact. And not that it just generates a bunch of stuff, which you can do through Claude or ChatGPT or whatever tool. The question is like, is it usable? Like, can you test against this? Can you automate against this? And so I would just encourage you all, if you are working in an organization and that is not something that you have sorted, that's kind of the first step. Get your examples ready. So AI thrives on context, as everyone knows, but it needs to be good context. And then you need some sort of way to benchmark to understand if the outputs you're getting are good. So like, for example, if you're doing API testing, maybe it's the API spec, right? That's going to serve as the background context for or grounding for the series of tests that you're going to then generate using AI. So those things are important because, as we all know, I've been part of software development life cycles where things evolve. We created the user story, and then like what comes out, it's like game of telephone. What comes out on the other side is, there's hallway conversations, there's Figma mockups, or there's conversations with engineering, and so it evolves. So understanding what your source of truth is, maybe it's Confluence, where you've got a decision log. Those things are really important to have organized in order to figure this out. And I think that, this is where Tricentis and ImpactQA can really help, is on step 3. So like, as you think about like how to embed AI into your quality engineering cycle, like we have a lot of at-bats at this. So we know, I guess, cricket or baseball, if you're in the US, cricket, for those that are in the UK and in other places, um, you know, what what does it actually look like in practice to actually solve for this, right? And you don't want this to be this science project on the side. You ultimately want it to scale, right? If you want it to impact the cost of quality, right, which is what we're talking about today, you need to have some folks that have seen the movie before. Um, And then the last thing is, you need to make sure you yourself are upskilling, right? But also, you need to understand, as a manager of teams, how you're going to actually orchestrate and manage, this new AI world where there's AI agents, which are effectively operating like maybe junior employees. How are you going to review their work? How are you going to govern their actions? And so that requires this sort of foundational understanding of, how these things work, their eccentricities, et cetera. So you're going to have to understand, like, where does AI behave like a teenager, right? So that you understand what are, the things that you need to implement. So those are just some thoughts around like where you could get started. So yeah, I'm curious if you have any other, best practices from your side or thoughts to share here.
Well, I think that anybody who's not going to be using agentic AI, especially in the quality assurance space, is not going to be there in the future, honestly. So you have to have a very good, tool like Tricentis, who have a very mature AI practice. Uh, Chris and the team are doing a fantastic job, and I think you should ask for if nothing else, for a POC with Tricentis, and I'm sure that you will see the value coming out of it. Uh, Again, like I said, that it's also all about change management. Depending upon where you are as an organization in your technology transformation journey, change management does play an important part. And we all know that change does bring in a better quality, increases the velocity of your deliveries, and overall increases the capability of the team to handle more complex tasks.
Great. Yeah. So I think, just to sum it all up, right? I think ImpactQA is ready, Tricentis is ready. So we're here to partner. The question is, are you ready? Right.